This is Radio Health Journal. I'm Reed Pence. This week, why your church choir or local chorus may be one of the last things to come back from the pandemic.
The very act of singing might be right up there with skydiving in terms of one's safety during this epidemic.
COVID and choirs, when Radio Health Journal returns.
I'm Nancy Benson, host of Radio Health Journal. If you enjoy listening to Radio Health Journal, you'll also like our sister show, Viewpoints, which covers a wide array of topics from education to history to the environment. Here's a preview of what they're covering this week on Viewpoints.
It becomes clear to everybody that what we're looking at was a terminal illness and that Margaret was dying.
How do you grieve the loss of a loved one? Then,
pre-COVID, current COVID, we live, I think, most of us, with that little voice in our head that is not particularly kind sometimes.
Bringing light to everyday anxiety through poetry. I'm Marty Peterson.
And I'm Gary Price. These stories in depth this week on your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints.
Listen to Viewpoints on your favorite radio station and subscribe and listen to shows anytime on Apple Podcasts and Google Play.
More than 54 million Americans experience the joy of singing in a chorus or choir. That makes it the nation's #1 way to participate in the performing arts. More than 3/4 of American choirs are religious, according to a survey by Chorus America. Another 15% are in grade and high schools, and about 5% are professional or community choruses, like the one you're hearing, the singers of the West Suburban Symphony near Chicago. But ever since COVID-19 roared onto the scene in mid-March, all of these choruses have come to a screeching halt. And experts have recently told chorus leaders in an anxiously awaited webinar that it could be as long as 2 years before they can come back.
I didn't think so much as felt, and I just felt stunned. It is perhaps the most discouraging news of my professional life.
That's Dr. Robert Russell, music director of choral art in Portland, Maine, and professor emeritus of music at the University of Southern Maine.
Perhaps I and others entered this phase of our life 2 months ago a bit naive. We'll hunker down, we'll take our medicine, and before too long we'll be back at it again. And then you hear from a panel of experts that, in fact, the very act of singing might be right up there with skydiving in terms of one's safety during this epidemic.
Normally, we've thought of 6 feet as a safe distance for the spread of the coronavirus. But it turns out that singing appears to be one of the best ways to spread the virus in tiny aerosolized droplets that travel a lot farther than just 6 feet.
Extrapolating from loud speech, we know that loud singing is going to produce more particles. Based on the studies, they were saying for speaking or for coughing, the particles could travel anywhere, the tiny microparticles could go anywhere from 16 to 26 feet.
That's Dr. Lucinda Halstead, medical director of the Evelyn Trammell Institute for Voice and Swallowing at the University of South Carolina and president of the Performing Arts Medicine Association. She's one of the webinar experts who delivered the bad news to the choral community. Choirs, especially large ones, are likely going to be one of the last things to come back from the pandemic.
Trained singers are very, very good at using their total tidal volume. And so at the end of the breath, when they take a great big breath in and then start singing, there's a lot of little tiny films that form in the alveoli that pop, and those are full of the virus. And those are the tiny, tiny aerosolized particles that go the great distance. And we think, based on the evidence of what's happened in choral and church situations around the world that have been hot spots of outbreaks, that this is pretty much what has occurred, is that you have all of these people who are generating a lot of aerosolized virus.
Very early in the pandemic, a tragedy in the Seattle area might have been a warning flag that choral singing was especially risky. About 60 members of the Skagit Valley Chorale met for practice on March 10th with little reason to fear. They reportedly kept a 6-foot distance from each other, and no coronavirus cases were known in the county. But someone in the choir was unknowingly infected. 45 chorus members, 3/4 of those who were there, came down with COVID-19, and 2 died. Choral directors like Russell had no idea rehearsal could be a perfect storm.
A person can be asymptomatic, attend a rehearsal, and we just don't know about that person's existence. We don't know that there's someone among us that is infected. The second thing is really a new term to me. Aerosolized particulates. I thought in the past that a cough is a cough, a sneeze is a sneeze. It happens, a few seconds later it's done. But the fact that microscopic droplets can remain active in the air for some hours after being expelled is just a new piece of information.
If singing projects those tiny particles much more than just talking, then it also follows that the bigger the voice, the better the potential viral spread.
That is our surmise at this point. And there are in these studies these people who are called super emitters. So even in normal conversation, they generate exponentially more particles per sentence, per breath than 90% of the rest of the population. And I would say that it follows by extension that all of the opera singers who can project across a large concert hall certainly would be people who would be delivering a huge amount of particles based on their ability to project. So they could almost be your super spreaders.
Singing is an athletic enterprise that we teach deep breathing, we teach continued use of the breath and bold use of the breath in order to make a phrase.
Now, you might be wondering about instrumentalists as well, those who use athletic breathing to play trumpets and horns, flutes and clarinets and bassoons. Halstead says there's been only one study that she's aware of.
They used smoke and wafted it across the bell of the wind instrument to see how much perturbation there was of air coming through the instrument. And there was surprisingly little. We do feel, as did researchers who published this article, that because there's all of the droplets, the heavier particles get stuck in the instrument, and that's why they all have to empty their spit valves and things, that contains a lot of the air.
So what does all this mean for churches that want to bring back their choirs when they reopen, or for community choruses thinking about coming back in the fall? There's a lot to consider, and a lot that won't work for choirs. For example, just about every business and activity that's thinking about reopening has face masks in their plan. But those are impractical here beyond simply muffling sound.
The N95 mask, which is the one everybody knows about, is impossible to sing in if you actually have it so that it actually fits you and protects you. I wear them. They're very hard to wear. There are studies that show that after about wearing them for an hour, the O2 saturation, because you're rebreathing your own oxygen, goes down and your CO2 inhalation and circulation in your body goes up. So by the end of the day, I usually have a headache. You wouldn't be able to sing with them because the resistance of the mask would be very, very hard to take a deep breath.
Physical distancing is another component of most plans, but the standard 6 feet isn't enough for those aerosolized particles. So what's left?
For small groups, small choirs, my neighbor, for example, is in a barbershop quartet. They were out on the lawn having a practice spaced out with the wind coming across their backs and forward, so everything was going away from them.
But for bigger groups, those are the ones who may be out a long time.
Right now, if you said, I want to go back in and have a choral rehearsal with my symphony chorus and at my church, we do not have anything near what we need in place since we don't have a vaccine and we don't have rapid testing. All you can do is modify your environment and hope that you do it enough with spacing and with air exchange, with filters, UV lighting, all of those kinds of things to protect yourself. But we have no way of knowing at this point when somebody walks into the rehearsal whether or not they're asymptomatic but infected.
Testing is an important component here. If we have widespread and fast turnaround test results, we can actually test singers as they come to a rehearsal. Take their temperature, maybe take a test once a week or something of that nature. All of that is labor intensive, time intensive, and it takes some time to develop all of that. But it seems possible that short of a vaccine, there may be some ways for singers to come together again and then sing in spaces, larger spaces with reasonable distances between the singers.
Halstead says short of a vaccine, a reliable rapid test is a must to make choral singing possible again. But Russell says, what about audiences?
Will the audience feel confident, comfortable? Do we need to put some distance between the singers and the audience? Do we need to put some distance between individual members of the audience? As members of the audience come in, do we do a temperature check? There are just so many unanswered questions going forward, and as time goes on, we will find a way to do that. I'm just not sure when and how long that will take.
We're going to get there. We're not going to get there tomorrow, but we're going to get there, and I don't think it's going to take 2 years.
But with all kinds of arts organizations struggling financially through the pandemic, will choruses be able to survive even a shorter layoff? Russell says yes. One way or another, they'll be back.
The people who sing love it too much. There is too much joy. There is too much satisfaction. There is too much enrichment. And the kind of experience that we have in one another's company is virtually without duplication. And I think audiences, likewise, love what we do, and we simply have to be patient. We will find a way through this. Singing will come back, and when it comes back, the tidal wave is going to be stronger than ever.
You can find out more about all of our guests through links on our website, radiohealthjournal.org. I'm Reed Pence. Coming up next week on Radio Health Journal.
They're denied a policy altogether, or they're charged higher rates.
How having a genetic mutation affects your chances of getting life insurance.
Then what drowning really looks like and the training it takes to see it.
Drowning is a deceptively quiet event. It really doesn't take the form that we see in television. And the misperceptions about it reach everywhere. It's not just the people in the general public.
All that and more on Radio Health Journal.
And that's Radio Health Journal for this week. Radio Health Journal is a production of MediaTrax Communications. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to learn more. And check Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify for a library of past programs. Plus, you'll always find previous segments and information about our guests at radiohealthjournal.org. Join us again next week for another edition of Radio Health Journal.